the great events for us in our calendar and now a significant item in the UK security calendar through the years. And of course it exists to honour the memory of Colin Cramphorn, late Chief Constable of West Yorkshire, first acting Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, last Deputy Chief Constable of the old RUC, a great friend to many here, including myself, who's taken all too early ahead of his time through cancer in 2006. We're honoured to play our part in perpetuating his memory, and particularly delighted that his widow, Lynn, his sister, Vicky, are here tonight, as they are every year, to join us remembering him as patronesses of this lecture. Please join me in expressing appreciation to them and to the memory of Colin Cramphorn. This lecture is about security in the wider sense. Particularly pleased to see here tonight Peter Clark, the inaugural lecturer, Cramphorn Lecture, who from 2007, who was, of course, then head of the Counter-Terrorism Command and long-time professional colleague and admirer of Colin, which set a wonderful gold standard for subsequent future lecturers who included David Petraeus in the wake of the surge in Iraq, James Mattis as CENTCOM, and many others. But of course, as Colin Cramphorn well understood, the definition of security was wider than kinetic operations, military security, even the most professional of counter-terrorism operations as launched by Peter Clark under the Pursue strand of the Prevent programme. It also included wider matters of ideas, beliefs, ideology, and no one is better capable of delivering that than our guest of honour tonight, Gilles Kepel, one of the preeminent, and this is perhaps a slightly un-British phrase, public policy intellectuals in France and the wider continent, whose work has been likened in the light of the challenges of the new totalitarianism. He's been described by some as the Raymond Aron of our times. He's got a new book here, Holocaust, Israel, Gaza, and the War Against the West. He's very kindly agreed to deliver his address tonight, then to answer questions. The question and answer session will be chaired by our very distinguished senior fellow, Sir John Jenkins, previously, as many of you will know, British ambassador in Saudi Arabia, author of the Muslim Brotherhood Review, and who's held almost every senior diplomatic posting in the wider Middle East and indeed beyond. So we're delighted to have his wisdom and services as well tonight. So Gilles, thank you for journeying from Paris here. We've organised a special Palestine solidarity march outside to lend an aspect of authenticity and urgency to your deliberations, and I know that you will not disappoint us tonight. Thank you for coming here and doing this.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and I'm delighted to be back at Policy Exchange. Now, I know my way from the Sofitel to Policy Exchange. I mean, I don't even have to open my eyes, so this is what I've always dreamt, to make this trip to London all the time. We actually organized this Palestine demonstration so that we would feel that we're in the mood. And thank you again for that, for Sir John, who was instrumental in manipulating the masses to that effect in his perfect Arabic. Not only that he had époustouflant French, but also absolutely perfect Arabic. So when we want to speak about something that Dean does not understand, we use Arabic. The title that was given to this presentation of those remarks was the aftermath of October 7th and its ripple effect in Western societies. So we have a ripple effect down there, so I have nothing else to say. But I wanted to put that into historical perspective, and to try to imagine how that would unfold, because other events in the Middle East had unforeseen consequences. And you know, for instance, when the so-called Arab Springs happened, everybody in the West was very happy, or most people were very happy, because this was going to be the end of Islamism. You know, Salazar, Franco, and the Greek colonels had gone away. Then the Berlin Wall had fallen, and then it was the time for the Arabs to have access to democracy, freedom, rule of law, and so on and so forth. And many thought, maybe because they were not as good artists as Sir John here, that you know, societies of the Muslim world, contemporary Muslim world, be they Arab or not Arab, had no cultural dimension of their own. You know, even though they live in the world of today, I mean, culturally, our society are a mix of horizontal and vertical, i.e., they come from a set history that has been molded, changed, and so on. They inherited it, and they sort of transform it, and of course they're open to foreign influences. And at times when we were optimistic, we think that the world is global, and McDonald's will be eaten everywhere, but then we discover there's halal McDonald's, kosher McDonald's, and then things become more complicated if it's less or more expensive in such and such place. And so most unexpectedly, one of the consequences for the so-called Arab Spring and the sort of the ideals of freedom and the like was the rise of ISIS, which struck at Europe with a vengeance, and particularly in my country, in France, where we had a little less than 300 people who died. I was personally sentenced to death by an ISIS ex-convict after he had murdered a policeman and his wife in Magnanville, in a little city close to Paris, in the Yvelines department, and had to live for close to 2 years under police protection. And so this was something that caught many people unawares, and particularly the intelligence establishment. In 2012, while Sarkozy was campaigning for re-election and was to be beaten by François Hollande, in March, i.e. a few weeks before the election, a Franco-Algerian guy by the name of Mohamed Merah in Toulouse and Montauban in the southwest of France killed a number of French soldiers who he thought were from Muslim descent. Some were, others were Caribbean and had no relation to the Muslim religion, but it was what the police call a délit de faciès. They were killed because of the color of their skins, but the other way around to some extent. And then he came to Toulouse and killed a Jewish teacher in a Jewish school and a few students. Then the statement of the Sarkozy-appointed counter-intelligence chief at the time, Bernard Squarcini, was something that said in substance, not to worry, these guys are lone wolves, and there's nothing to study. And this was really a watershed moment, because myself and a few others just criticized very heavily the chief of intelligence, saying that he didn't know what he was saying, that the guy Mohamed Merah was not a lone wolf, that he had been socialized in jihadi circles. He had gone to the Middle East, to North Africa, even to Afghanistan, thanks to a number of networks. And all the more so He had lived in an atmosphere or an ambience, we say atmosphere in French, where people were thinking about the post-Al-Qaeda times. Bin Laden's Al-Qaeda was a sort of Leninist organization, you know, pyramidal or vertical, if you think. People were given orders to go and to schools in America to study how to drive a plane, and then they would be sent to the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and Congress. The Bin Laden model failed ultimately, failed because Al-Qaeda was destroyed in its attempt to build an Islamic State in Iraq, and Bin Laden disappeared only to be terminated a few years later in his hideout in Pakistan. His chief PR person, who was a Syrian by the name of Abu Mus'ab al-Suri, and who had studied in France, he was a francophone, when Gilles Deleuze, the postmodern philosopher, had elaborated his revolutionary rhizome. You say that, rhizome in English? Rhizome theory, i.e. that as opposed to the Leninists, the way to have a revolution come was to organize, you know, sort of disinhibited violence from society, that, you know, workers or students would kill with some people that were, you know, rather more soft targets than government offices here, there, and the like. That would in turn ignite a strong reaction from the bourgeoisie or the state, whatever, that would repress the proletariat, and then the proletariat would rise in revolutionary spirit and you know, topple the bourgeoisie and the like. And Suri, to some extent, who was studying in engineering, never completed actually, at Gilles University in Paris, which was the hotbed of those leftist post-Marxist ideologues, was to some extent, even if he never mentioned that in his writing, influenced by this shift from the Leninist model to the sort of rhizome model. And his reading of ISIS, at least for the part that would go to and fro to Europe, was to aim at soft targets, so that you know, teachers would be killed, and police officers, of course, but ordinary people who had nothing to do that, and then that would in turn lead to a sort of pogromist, anti-Muslim reaction by police and also by, you know, the extreme right and what have you. And then Muslims as a whole, I mean, instead of having within their ranks a very small minority of activists, would gather behind the Islamist banner and the jihadist banner. And this was what was implemented when Merah took to action. To what extent Merah himself was really aware of what he was doing is not for certain, because the guy was uneducated. He was a petty criminal. But you know, prison is the school of crime, as we know, and it was the major incubator for that kind of ambient jihadism, with little and then less and less organization. And so it took some time for police authorities and to understand the challenge, and that, you know, leads to a number of questions of the capacity of the state agencies and academics to think together or to exchange views. I mean, this has we have had significant progress on that level in France, but at the time it was still quite difficult to communicate. And so then, to go back to the beginning of my talk, we had all those kids going to Syria in order to fight against Bashar al-Assad. And at the beginning, they were not discouraged to go by authorities because Bashar al-Assad was labeled enemy of mankind by the West. And for this and other reasons, those kids who were perceived as slightly dangerous were better seen off to Syria than, staying in France. A mistake that had already been made in Egypt, in Algeria, during the times of the Afghan Jihad. And the Algerian authorities helped Islamist militants and jihadists who were in Algerian jails or Egyptian jails, like Ayman al-Zawahiri and others, to go to Islamabad and via a connection in Jeddah airport, so that they would go there, fight against the Russians, and hopefully die as martyrs. Most of them did not die and came back. And this was what happened also with the Syrian experience. And many came back. They had been reinforced in their hatred for the West. They had been socialized in jihadi groups, and they had trained in military action or terrorist action, killing Alawi police officers and implementing strict Sharia and the like. And so for that, originally the police was called unawares, and in spite of the fact that people like myself and others had translated Suri into French and sort of pointed at what was taking place, but it took some time. And at the end of the day, the ISIS threat and violence was such in France that this was taken seriously. Very significant amount of people were recruited into intelligence, were trained on those issues, and there was a sort of watershed in terms of the capacity of the police and the security establishment to understand and to evaluate, to gauge, if you wish, what those people had in mind, how they were functioning, and ultimately, together with action on the ground, i.e. bombings of ISIS shelters and hideouts from the skies by the Western coalition, the Jordanians and others, and the Kurds who did the job on the ground, not to be thanked for that, as you know, but this is the unfortunate fate of the Kurds in the Middle East. So we managed to get rid of ISIS as a reticular or network-based organization, by the end of the 2019s, early 2020. But then we had a new type of threat, which is what I called in French jihadisme d'atmosphère, which Lord Mandelson yesterday translated as ambient jihadism. I was looking for, so does it work when I say ambient jihadism on British ears? Well, jihadisme d'atmosphère is unclear in French. You have to make an effort. So as long as it raises your awareness, half of the job is done. And i.e., we're dealing with people who do not belong to organizations, whether it be neither the former sort of Leninist vertical Al-Qaeda system or the network-based or reticular or horizontal ISIS system, but rather who go on the web and on social networks and identify targets and then take to action. Not necessarily that they receive instructions. I mean, no one tells them go and kill so and so, but they feel enthusiasm or zeal, which in Arabic is called Hamas. Actually, it means zeal or enthusiasm, and then they would, for instance, behead a teacher, like they did with teacher Samuel Paty, who had shown his pupils cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad and to discuss them and think about what freedom of speech means. And also stabbed to death another teacher who had done nothing special but happened to teach history. And the killer, the first one was a Chechen asylum beneficiary, and the other one was an Ingush, so not far from Chechnya. Had attended school and just hated history because he thought that the teaching of history led to secularism and laicite, i.e. to enmity to Islam. So this, of course, has reached a point which is a sort of climatic dimension. And so the problem we now have is to what extent what is taking place in Israel and Palestine may lead or not lead to a renewal of this ambient jihadism. Not that people are being directed to exert retribution against the evil West, which is now requalified as North by the global South, but that solidarity with the victims of the Israeli bombings in Gaza, for instance, may lead some to, apart from demonstrating and chanting in front of Westminster and others, apart from chanting anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic slogans, take to action and actually commit crimes, murders, and the like. And this is a big challenge for us, and in particular for the French as of today, because we're 100 days before the beginning of the Olympics in Paris. And the Olympic Games in 1972 had already been taken hostage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as you remember. And most of the other celebration and the games are going to take part in just north of Paris, in the Seine-Saint-Denis or 93 département, which is, so activists say, a Muslim majority département. The reason for that is that the state wants to build significant infrastructure there in order to boost the upward social mobility after the Olympics are over. But the challenge is that the Stade de France, where much of the games are going to take place, was the locus of one of the attacks in November 15, when, November 13, sorry, 2015, when the Bataclan musical was attacked, and when we had this terror group coming from Syria via Belgium or the Balkans to France that killed more than 100 people in Paris. Fortunately, the attack that was planned on the stadium did not reach the magnitude it should have reached had it worked, because the guy who was supposed to detonate himself panicked, and he did it outside the stadium instead of doing it in the opening, where it would have led to hundreds of casualties. So this is to some extent where we are now. So there are a number of different issues that are brought together, and so the difficulty is to try to give a hierarchy to them in order to focus police efforts where they should be focused. And this is taken very seriously, as you know, because President Macron, the day before tomorrow, but before yesterday, or was it, yeah, 2 days ago, gave an interview to one of the major radio programs in the morning, saying that there were Plan B and Plan C if they thought the level of threat was such the opening ceremonies on the River Seine would not take place, would happen in the Trocadero, which is an esplanade overlooking the river. And if that was perceived as even more serious, then it would happen in the stadium, which is close and easier to police and control, which of course is not the best way of publicizing the tickets for Paris. and so the Airbnb market has seen a drop in the meanwhile. Now, what are the pros and the cons in this situation? On the domestic front, due to the ISIS threat, the French security agencies and the prosecution system, for the fact that we now have a national anti-terrorism prosecutor, which has brought to trial hundreds of jihadists, has not only reinforced the awareness and the capacity of the intelligence agencies, but also has, and this was the role of the prosecutor, who's now retiring but joining the cabinet of the Minister of Justice, he had been able to build a sort of coherent and cogent narrative about what is at stake in this ambient jihadism, as he also calls it. And I believe that the first issue for security and intelligence is to understand as precisely as possible the threat which is brought by the enemy. So on the domestic front, the issue, and we've had opportunities to discuss that with in the same room yesterday with some of the participants in the previous roundtables, is the sort of gradual dimension, i.e., on the one hand, you have those groups that advocate what President Macron called separatism, which in French political parlance means that there's a sort of communalism, to use language back from the British Raj, so I hope you would understand as inheritors of that type of colonialism, i.e. that, you know, what we have in common as that group of Muslims or that people from that background or this and that is far superior to our common French identity. And therefore that, you know, we pay lip service to France or to laïcité or whatever. We benefit from it. We use the social benefits and the like. We vote even. And one of the interesting developments is that you had that also with George Galloway in Britain and others, but part of the extreme left now, the Mélenchon extreme left groups, you know, he is former and probably still at his heart a Trotskyite and an atheist, are elected by people who are told to vote for him in the radical mosques, which is, you know, which creates a sort of wider pond of people. And then through those networks and also those social networks, you find this atmosphere or this ambience on which people who are willing to take to action will find the rationale, the religious, the political, or whatever rationale for action which is not directed by an organization that can be, you know, how to say, controlled by the police or infiltrated by the police. Yeah, I knew that English was but mispronounced French, but then thank you for comforting me in this idea. And infiltrated by the policing force. So this is a big challenge. I mean, because if you start to dissolve or to close some of those organizations, then you're going to be named Islamophobe. And being named an Islamophobe is something that will bring more of the so-called moderate Muslims against the state. Let's take an example, which is we had a committee against Islamophobia in France, CCIF, which was organized by Muslim Brother activists, and they were adamant on anything that they had lawyers, and they were probably under, you know, they were helped by some rich people from the Arabian Peninsula, as we're it's for attribution to their streaming. I will not go further in my remarks, but many people will understand who is mentioned here. And then they, after Samuel Paty was murdered, because they had rather ambiguous views about that, Gérald Darmanin, the Minister of Interior, seized the occasion to close the organization. Of course, he was vilified, and they took shelter in Turkey, which is a country where they can express freely their whatever they think. But at the end of the day, repression worked, and we have no such thing as this committee anymore, which is putting pressure. So, a daring action against some groups in opportune occasion is working, and these are lessons which are interested, to think about, and maybe in situations which are comparable in other European countries might be of interest to reflect about. So the Paty issue itself, the beheading of Samuel Paty, was an interesting thing because the Chechen guy did not belong to a Chechen organization. He belonged to a milieu where violence is still very, very much at the center of the Weltanschauung and of the rites of passage of a young man. The Chechen war against Russia, time immemorial, under the Tsars or under the Soviet Union, under Putin, were extremely violent, and many of the Chechens have been recruited by security organizations, or in a more prosaic way. Many in the Chechen community are now policing the drug traffic in France. When Moroccans, Algerians, Tunisians, and others in the south peddle dope and have fights between themselves not to control the dope market, Chechens come. They don't touch the dope. That they kill a few people, and then you can go buy your dope and leave your key cards on the counter, and the Chechens are there. So there is this violence which is used, not by everybody, of course, and this there are those inequalities, if you wish, of the community that can be put to action, to use, and in this case, this was what happened. Abdullah Anzorov, the murderer, was socialized into that. He did not belong to any organization per se. He saw the fabricated story about the teacher who had expelled Muslims from class and who was vilifying the Prophet, and he said, "This is what I want to do. I want to be a martyr." And then he went to the school. He had bought a knife, bribed some of the pupils, and beheaded the poor teacher. And in this, he was. This is where you have the reaction, the graduation between the mass movements, which are supposedly not radical, and the radical. The story and the fabricated story had gained an enormous amount of traction because a Muslim lobby, I'm through, 1 minute, a Muslim lobby had advertised it, and so it had reached hundreds of thousands of people, and so this is the kind of thing that we're worried with internally. Now, this the spark that sets fire to the plane, as Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov used to say, may come from a foreign event, which is internalized, and hence the war in the post-October 7 action is a case in, okay, people can demonstrate for Palestine or against the killings in the bombings in Gaza, but the issue is to what extent at the defining moment a number of people will go further and use that as a motive or as a pretext to take to terrorist and criminal jihadi action on our soil. My feeling is that the way the situation is evolving now, and particularly with Iran having attacked Israel, and to some extent is changing the representation of Israel in the general population, because Israel is being perceived as a would-be victim again, not mostly as the bad guy in Gaza. So something which probably will lead, not necessarily in Islamic circles, but in the general population, to a decrease of this feeling of hostility. And also because there again, the attacks by Iranian drones, missiles, and the like rings a bell, and had set a wave of panic. I was interviewed yesterday by a French ladies magazine, and who told me that many of the readers, the female readers, wrote and said, "Is it the beginning of World War III? Are we going to be attacked by drones and missiles?" And so there is that. On the other hand, this is clearly giving a pretext to a number of militants. Now, when you think of ISIS, ISIS was not interested in the Israeli-Palestinian issue. The Palestinians, in a way, were perceived by ISIS people as militants who had deflected the fight against the local despots, because there was Union Sacrée for Palestine, and then they were not fighting against their local despots. The fact that Palestine focuses so much the action nowadays is not necessarily something that will help mobilization against other states. So this is where we are now. I'm not in the secret of intelligence, but I believe that our two challenges are A, to understand better and with a more acute level of awareness to some extent, what is at stake, how those ideologies are changing, are adapting all the time, and this is a major issue. And so you have to read the text, you have to speak JJ's Arabic and other things. My old foe Olivier Roy used to say it's useless to know Arabic to understand what happens in Islam in France, because those guys don't speak Arabic anymore. Well, most of them speak broken Arabic, but they know that what is written in Arabic is sacred, and which makes it even more complicated, and which makes it important to know the language, want to have a counter discourse. B, to try to gauge as exactly as we can what might be the consequences of what happens, to evaluate the foreign threats and their capacity to influence not only on public opinion, but on the capacity to take to terrorist action on our ground. So, sorry to be so long. Usually in French I'm more concise, but for lack of mastery of English I have to use periphrastic things, and instead of going from A to B I have to go through C and Z in order to make myself try to be clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gilles. If you can say periphrastic in English, I think your command of the language is better than 90% of the population of this country.
Well, is that a criteria?
But thank you for that. That was great. This is a subject which is just so expansive. Do you want to take questions up there or down here or here? Okay, much better. Right, we have about 15 minutes for questions. Can you keep them to the point? Everybody always says this, but please to the point. And when you make them, can you say who you are as well? So we'll take questions now. Paddy first, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really.
Say who you are. I know who you are.
You do, yeah. My name is Paddy McGuinness. I'm an advisor of a firm called Brunswick Group, and I used to be Deputy National Security Advisor overseeing threats to the UK.
And the Olympics.
I didn't do the Olympics, I was a bit late for that, but I did do a lot with the French through the period that professors talked about. The thing I want to talk about is the role of Iran as regards this ambient jihadism. We in this country, of course, have a wellspring which comes from Salman Rushdie's, the threat to Salman Rushdie after the publication of the Satanic Verses, and he, of course, has just published now and is again prominent. And I'm just really interested in the extent to which there may be an opportunity for Iran to have a role in galvanizing, influencing, or having advantage from this ambient jihadism.
There was one more question, I think, over there. We'll take two. Was there a question over there, gentleman over there? No? Okay, we'll do the Iran question. Because it is a fascinating question. I write about it in the Muslim Brotherhood Review, you'll remember.
And my feeling is that Iran is not in great shape today. That, the October 7th agenda was not their agenda. I mean, at first I did not believe it. I thought that, how could Sinwar decide on his own? Because all the material, the intelligence, the training, everything was provided at the Pasdaran. The Azzeddin al-Qassam brigade were reorganized following the Pasdaran thing. And Sinwar himself, said after he was freed from jail by Bibi Netanyahu, he'd take his first holidays using the opportunity of the Rafah crossing being opened by the Egyptians at the time of the so-called Arab Springs to go to Tehran and being received by Qasem Soleimani, who promised everything. Now, the problem is that both Hezbollah and Iran are not, I believe, in a capacity to start aggressive action against foreign powers because they are worried by their own survival. And my assumption is that the next target of Israel will be Hezbollah, because Biden told no escalation. That means Iran. And after Hamas has been probably militarily destroyed, if not destroyed, at least significantly weakened as a spearhead of the coalition, of the axis of resistance, now the next step is Hezbollah. And if both are significantly, I need you all the time, significantly weakened.
There is a periphrastic way of doing this.
That will mean that Iran is losing his grip over the Levant and to a large extent over Israel. And in Iran itself, the situation is not great for the powers that be. And what I see, but maybe my analysis should be confirmed by others who know the country better, is that what we were used to, i.e. the monarchy, or the clergy being at the center of everything and being in capacity to have access to very different layers of society, and to keep with the Shia things open. What was forbidden is public, but in private you can do whatever you want. This is being smashed away by the rise of the guardians of the Pasdaran, who are riffraff from the periphery and who repressed the middle class women very, very harshly, repressed the Kurds, repressed the Baluch, and therefore they are on a shrinking political basis as of today. So I'm not sure that they have, for the time being, the capacity to project terrorism in Europe like they did when they were much stronger, when Khomeini was in charge. And so that would be my gut feeling, but it's not based on I didn't know you were to ask this question. We had attacks of an Iranian nature, also not of the magnitude of Rushdie, but since then we haven't had anything from that side.
We have, I should say, Policy Exchange has just produced a report by Paul Stott over there, who's the head of our extremism and security and extremism and
Security and Extremism Unit.
extremism. That's right. Yeah, I didn't need help. So,
I'll read it before
about the Iranian, because we have the Iranian cultural centres and so forth, which are clearly under the direct control of the Khomeinist state. What exactly their influence is interesting. I mean, Tom has views on this as well. The whole issue of, and I think it's here and also in Germany. Really good. I think less so.
Yes.
Sorry, there were two questions. One was Damon, and then Baron Faulkner. We go to Damon first, and then we'll go to
Damien McElroy from a paper called The National. I just want you used the word communalism, and you talked about the difference perhaps between how the French and the English regard these things. But you also used the word Franco-Algerian about Mohamed Merah, and if you could talk a bit about how we've evolved since 2015 and whether the French would actually benefit from looking at the background of people who are posing a threat, and how that communalism allows them to form up when there are big events like Gaza happening.
There were two questions. We'll take two together. Lady Faulkner.
Kishwa Faulkner, Crossbench Fair in the House of Lords. Thank you for giving us that quick tour of modern contemporary Islamism. But I wanted to ask you a slightly broader question about Britain versus France. And it's this.
About what?
Britain versus France.
Britain, okay.
And it's this. You have a very strong culture of laïcité, which President Macron has re-emphasized again and again, especially after all of those incidents that you described so well. And you have a very large Muslim population. I think it's bigger than the UK's.
Yeah.
And here we have a completely different approach to secularism and indeed to integration as well. And I wonder if you would comment on which country seems to get a better grip on dealing with Islamism when it's radical and extremist.
Okay, I think if there are two similar questions, then only one asks you to give a scorecard.
Yes, well, the Merah's mother was famous for her statements, and she said, "I'm so glad that my son brought France to its knees. This is the country that we love and that we hate, and we were forced to come here in order to make a living, and we hate everything, and then we send them for colonialism." So the father was also a drug dealer who had been sent back to Algeria after he'd done time in jail. Okay, but there is this feeling that we have to break with French society, whereas, as you said, the issue in France, and I used communalism also because the way we look at Britain from the other side of the channel is that the communalism of the Raj has been re-implemented in the British Isles when the Raj moved here. I'm not saying anything against a new separation between Scotland and England, which would follow the one between Pakistan, and now that you have a Pakistani First Minister. And this was only to pull JJ's leg.
I'm Scottish on one side and English on the other.
And the laïcité issue, I believe, is also something which is interesting when Jews in Britain, from what I hear, feel threatened and surprised by the level of anti-Semitism or anti-Israeli or anti-whatever you call against them, anti-themselves, which is, and for some reason, this is not the case now in France. We had a lot of Muslim anti-Semitism in France, and many people from the lower class Jews from the banlieues in Seine-Saint-Denis moved to Paris, the ones who could, because it had become unbearable. But by and large, I would say that, as you mentioned, we're not only the country with the biggest amount of Muslims in Europe, but also the biggest amounts of Jews. We have 600,000 Jews approximately, and 6 to 8 million Muslims, approximately, because by law, the laïcité does not allow the state to ask you your religion, and it is considered irrelevant in terms of who belongs to the nation. And I believe that to some extent that has led a number of French Jews to believe that they are very well protected as citizens, as laïc citizens in France, and which may be why there is less fear or panic as of today. And now Macron not only has reasserted this issue of laïcité against separatism, which was a word he coined. I mean, we talked about that together, but he was the one who said it, who uttered the message. And 20 years ago, we had the first threats at schools, and this was not understood in this country, where we were vilified, and Tariq Ramadans and others, took the lead and put words in the mouths of Tony Blair and others at the time. We had this for 15 years. We had the Muslim Brothers sending pupils to wear hijabs in schools, and if a school is funded by the taxpayer, whether it's public or private, then it has to be laïc, and you cannot wear a yarmulke, whatever, a hijab or what have you, or on a ostentatious cross. There are no crucifixes in schools, of course. And so, but it was unclear, and for 15 years there was a lot of turmoil. The brothers managed to drive a wedge into the system, and finally we gathered this Commission Stasi, which has nothing to do with the former Stasi of East Germany, of course. It was the name of the president, and of which I was a member. And we defined a notion that say that the wearing any ostentatious religious sign was prohibited in school, so that it would be translated into law. The law was passed by the Chirac government at the time, and for 15 years we had peace in schools. Now, with ISIS and with ambient jihadism, this is starting again. With female pupils coming with long gowns and showing that clearly that they do not share with the ethos, criticizing teachers when the history teachers, math, natural science, and the like, and so on and so forth. So actually, I believe it's in the thinking of the government, and also part of the opposition, that we would have some sort of this Commission, not Stasi, the poor Stasi has passed away now, but with another name, again to reinforce our laïcité and feeling of national belonging as we adjust it to the present threats, because the nature of the threat has evolved, as I have tried to show you in my little longish remarks.
That was fantastic, Gilles. I'm told that I have to be very punctual about this. I think it is 7:30, more or less. Thank you very much. I think we will continue this over dinner. There is so much to discuss about all, and I'm really interested in this issue of communalism. There was a short debate about this yesterday over lunch, in the context of Batley, and whether this was something that should be resolved within a community or not. And I thought it was very interesting, your remarks about the negative connotations the communauté and communalism is quite negative anyway, but communalism has in French as opposed to English, and I think that is an interesting distinction.
Well, if I may say a word before dinner, supper, as you say. Communalism in the Raj system was not perceived as that positive. I mean, it was, how can we manage that? So we'll deal with the Sikhs and the Hindus and the Muslims and but when you use community in English, it is a very positive term.
Yes, it does.
The community is the epitome of everything, and the same is true in America. Whereas in French, communauté, which does not have exactly the same semantic span, is more perceived as something which leads to separatism, i.e., instead of having people who share in the common ideals of the state, you have people who have their own little view, and what knits them together is stronger
Yes.
than, you know, the social fabric.
Yes.
And that is, you know, the sort of basic thing which then be built up and used by extremists. So, I mean, this is a conceptual debate.
I think the distinction that I would draw in English is between the sort of sentimental idea of community, as somewhere where people live in cosy little villages, sit around coal fires in the evening, drinking beer and eating pies, and hovis.
Or refusing to eat.
Or refusing to
pork pies.
Pork pies. No, pork, I come from pork pies.
Beers,
I come from the middle. I come from where they're made. So don't be rude about them. And the idea of the political community, which in the broad European tradition, certainly in the French and British tradition, is coterminous with the national community. And that's the thing that seems to me to be fracturing. It's slightly different in Germany because of the linguistic question, but that is the thing that seems to me to be fracturing. And the risk is that we become like the Middle East, rather than the Middle East becomes like us. And that's
or the Balkans.
Or the Balkans, so we can talk about that. But anyway, that was tremendous. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Tom Tugendhat, who is the Minister of State for Security, and also, I should say, MP for Tunbridge and Manning, which is 4 miles away from where I live. I'm just the other side of the constituency boundary, so it's Greg who's my MP. But I follow your Facebook postings with great interest as you walk around Tunbridge, telling everybody.
It was a great
You stalked me.
a great demonstration of community precisely that you've given us. But is it communalism? We shall see. This is looking forward.
Well, look, Monsieur le Professeur, je vous remercie énormément d'être parmi nous. JJ, it's great to see you. Lord Godson, who has clearly fled. It's as always, it's lovely to be hosted here, and it's a particular pleasure to be here after the impressive work that this organisation has done on the Iranian regime. The publication that came out this week, or just last week, it was I think earlier this week, has really added enormous amounts to our understanding of the actions of a very nefarious state in our own country, certainly at a time when its malicious intent is being demonstrated globally. Now, as many of you will know, this area is an area that I have worked on for a number of years, and I think that the work that Professor Kepel has done is enormously important, because what he is highlighting is the challenges to our very state, to the homogeneity not just of our people, but to our ability to stick together as a homophonic people, in the sense that we have a common language that enables us to discuss the challenges that we face. Now, I think there are some really interesting challenges that we share, and some others that, as we've just heard, that differ slightly between our two nations. But one of the things that I think does bind us together is the fact that in both our countries, the place of Muslim Britons or Muslim Frenchmen has been enormously important. We have seen in the United Kingdom Muslims playing a very important, very active and very welcome part across our community. And the challenge that we're facing here is not with Islam, but with a very narrow sect within it that seeks to create an other out of a whole. And that is a challenge that we all face. And we've discussed this here through various reports. JJ wrote a very impressive report on the Muslim Brotherhood a number of years ago. And as Professor Gilles points out, groups, the like of which sadly we see far too many here, have also demonstrated that being the loudest in the room does not mean you represent the most people. It simply means that the attempts to separate are those which most inspire a few hard-headed individuals. Now, this is a huge challenge for all of us going forward, and it's a particular challenge when many of us in our society are, if I may steal your words, David, so many in our society are somewheres and anywheres, that the anywheres are not always as quick to identify that the belonging means everyone. And the belonging means everyone in our society, whether or not they belong in a geographic sense historically, or whether they belong in a geographic sense presently. But that belonging is essential to all of us. And so finding ways in which we can make that work, I think, is enormously important. Now, it's certainly true that I'm not alone in recognising this, and many of you will have heard the words of the Prime Minister outside Number 10 earlier this year, when he highlighted how our streets have been hijacked by small groups who are hostile to our values and have no respect for our democratic traditions. That's a very harsh statement, but sadly it's a real one. And it's one that has been echoed by, as Professor Gilles put it, the words of the French Interior Minister Darmanin after the murder of the school teacher Samuel Paty. So this is an enormous subject, and one that I think will define not just our nation, but actually our relationship and our friendship as nations over coming years, because it is absolutely essential that we defend the rights of British citizens to be part of our community, whether they be Christian or Muslim or Jewish, whatever their ethnic or religious tradition. It is absolutely essential that British citizens' rights are protected and valued, and that those who seek to turn friends, neighbours, cousins, family into foreigners or outsiders in their own community are rejected by all of us for the negative influence that they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming. I think we now need to vacate the room. There is, as always, refreshments, I'm told, next door? No? There are none? Julie is very strictly... Clear the room. Clear the room. We just need to clear the room. Which sounds like the sort of thing that...